The early morning sun cast a golden glow over the market, illuminating the vibrant colors of the fresh produce like a painter's palette. I breathed in the familiar scent of damp earth, sweet berries, and fresh bread, a perfume I had come to associate with my life's purpose. This was my sanctuary, my battlefield, and my victory garden, all rolled into one. I was Alex, and this was Harvest and Hearth. My stall was a carefully curated masterpiece of artisanal delights. Jars of my signature sun-dried tomato and rosemary jam sat in gleaming rows, their deep red color a testament to the hours I'd spent perfecting the recipe. Loaves of my rustic sourdough, their crusts crackling with promise, were nestled in wicker baskets. And in the center, a pyramid of my award-winning wild mushroom and truffle pâté, a product that had put Harvest and Hearth on the map. "Alex, you've outdone yourself this time," Mrs. Gable, a regular since my very first market day, said, her eyes twinkling as she sampled a piece of the pâté. "It's divine." "Only the best for you, Alina," I replied with a warm smile. "The chanterelles are from the North Ridge this season. They're exceptional." This was what it was all about. The connection to the land, to the people, to the food we shared. I had built Harvest and Hearth from the ground up, fueled by a small inheritance from my grandmother, the only person in my family who had ever truly believed in me. While my parents were busy funding my sister Chloe's latest, artistic endeavor, I was kneading dough, pickling vegetables, and driving my beat-up van to farmers' markets before the sun came up. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my reverie. It was my mother. I felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach, a premonition of the emotional gymnastics to come. "Hi, Mom," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Alex, darling, guess what? Chloe and Ben are moving back to town." Her voice was a symphony of forced enthusiasm, a sound that always set my teeth on edge. "And they have the most incredible idea. It's going to change everything for this family." I closed my eyes for a moment, the vibrant colors of the market seeming to dim. Chloe, my younger sister, the golden child, the black hole of my parents' attention and resources. And Ben, her husband, a man whose ambition was only matched by his incompetence. Their incredible ideas had a consistent track record of ending in financial ruin and emotional devastation, with me somehow always expected to pick up the pieces. "That's interesting, Mom," I said, the word interesting a poor substitute for the string of profanities that were screaming in my head. "We're all coming over for dinner on Friday to celebrate," she announced, not asked. "Your place is just so perfect for these things." My home, the one thing I had managed to build for myself, a physical manifestation of my success. A beautiful, renovated farmhouse with a sprawling garden, paid for with the blood, sweat, and tears of Harvest and Hearth. It was my sanctuary, and now it was about to be invaded. The days leading up to the dinner were a blur of anxiety. I found myself scrubbing already spotless countertops, arranging flowers in vases, and stocking the pantry with their favorite wine. It was a ridiculous, ingrained response, a desperate attempt to earn the approval that had always been so freely given to Chloe. They arrived on Friday, a tidal wave of fake smiles and thinly veiled criticisms. My father clapped me on the shoulder, his eyes scanning my home with a look that was more appraisal than affection. "Nice place, Alex. Glad to see all that hard work paid off." My mother, on the other hand, seemed to think my success was a personal affront. "It's a bit big for one person, isn't it?" she said, her voice dripping with a saccharine sweetness that did little to hide the barb beneath. And then there was Chloe, draped on Ben's arm, a vision of effortless entitlement. "Wow, Alex," she said, her eyes sweeping over my carefully curated decor. "You've really done well for yourself. It's almost like you're a real businesswoman now." The dinner was a masterclass in passive aggression. Every compliment was a backhanded slap, every question a veiled insult. They marveled at the success of Harvest and Hearth, but in a way that suggested it was a happy accident, a stroke of luck that had somehow befallen me. Finally, after dessert had been served and the wine had been flowing freely, Ben cleared his throat, a smug smile playing on his lips. "So, Alex," he began, his tone oozing with a condescending familiarity that made my skin crawl. "We've been thinking. Harvest and Hearth has a lot of potential, but it's stuck in the minor leagues. It's time to take it to the next level. Chloe chimed in, her eyes gleaming with a predatory light. We want to join you, Alex. We want to make Harvest and Hearth a national brand, a household name. I looked at their expectant faces, my heart sinking like a stone. This wasn't a friendly offer of collaboration. This was a hostile takeover bid disguised as a family reunion. The first bite of the serpent's apple had been taken, and I had a feeling the venom was about to spread. A silence descended upon the dining room, thick and heavy with unspoken words. The remnants of the dinner, the half-empty wine glasses, the crumbs of the artisanal bread I had baked myself, seemed to mock me, a testament to the Trojan horse I had so willingly invited into my home. Join me, I repeated, my voice a carefully controlled whisper. What exactly do you mean by join me? Ben leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with the fervor of a televangelist. We're talking about a complete restructuring, Alex. A new vision for the company. We're talking about taking Harvest and Hearth to the next level. Chloe, ever the supportive wife, nodded enthusiastically. Ben has a background in business development, you know. He sees the big picture. He can turn this little market stall of yours into a national empire. I felt a cold dread seep into my bones. This was worse than I had imagined. They didn't just want a piece of the pie, they wanted the whole damn bakery. I see, I said, my voice still dangerously quiet. And what role exactly do you see for me in this? New vision. Ben waved a dismissive hand. Oh, you'll still be involved, of course. You're the creative genius, after all. You'll be in charge of product development. You can play with your little recipes to your heart's content. But the real business decisions, the scaling, the distribution, the branding, that's where we come in. I'll be the CEO naturally, and Chloe will head up creative development. She has such a flair for these things. I stared at them, my mind reeling. They were proposing a coup, a hostile takeover of my own company, and they were doing it with a straight face, as if they were offering me a gift. The audacity of it was breathtaking. My mother, who had been watching the exchange with a nervous smile, chose that moment to intervene. Isn't it wonderful, Alex? Your brother-in-law is going to make you a millionaire. You should be grateful for his help. My father, ever the pragmatist, chimed in. He's right, Alex. You've taken this as far as you can on your own. It's time to let the professionals take over. Don't let your ego get in the way of a real opportunity. The room seemed to close in on me, the air thick with their expectations, their entitlement, their complete and utter disregard for my feelings, my work, my life. They saw me not as a person, but as a resource, a stepping stone on their path to unearned success. I took a deep breath, the scent of the wilting flowers on the table filling my lungs. When I spoke, my voice was no longer a whisper. It was cold, hard, and unyielding. No. The word hung in the air, a single, sharp note of defiance in a symphony of familial obligation. Ben's smile faltered. No, what do you mean no? I mean no, I repeated, my gaze sweeping over their stunned faces. Harvest and Hearth is not for sale. It's not a commodity to be bought and sold. It's my company, my creation, my life's work, and I will not be relegated to any position in it. I am the CEO, the founder, and the heart and soul of this business, and that is not going to change. Chloe's face contorted into a mask of righteous indignation. You're being selfish, Alex. You're so jealous of our happiness that you can't bear to see us succeed. My father's face darkened with anger. She's right, Alex. You're letting your pride cloud your judgment. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and you're throwing it away because you can't stand to share the spotlight. The accusations rained down on me, a hailstorm of guilt and manipulation. But for the first time in my life, their words had no power over me. The years of emotional blackmail, the constant pressure to put their needs before my own, had finally reached a breaking point. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I think it's time for you all to leave, I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and newfound strength. My mother's eyes filled with tears, the weapon of choice in her emotional arsenal. Alex, how can you do this to us? We're your family. A family that wants to steal my business and my identity, I retorted, my voice rising with each word. A family that sees my success as something to be plundered. That's not a family, Mom. That's a pack of wolves. I walked to the door and opened it, the cool night air a welcome relief from the suffocating atmosphere in the house. "Goodbye," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. They stared at me, their faces a mixture of shock, anger, and disbelief. It was clear they had expected me to crumble, to acquiesce to their demands as I had always done in the past. But the woman standing before them was not the same person they had known. The years of being the good daughter, the supportive sister, had been stripped away, leaving behind a core of steel they had never suspected was there. My mother was the last to leave. She paused at the doorway, her face a mask of sorrow and disappointment. "You're making a terrible mistake, Alex," she whispered, her voice filled with a chilling finality. "You either do this for your family or you're no longer a part of it." The words hung in the air, an ultimatum designed to break me. But as I watched them retreat into the darkness, their car a shadowy beast disappearing down my driveway, I felt not a sense of loss, but a surge of liberation. The golden cage had been opened, and I had finally found the courage to fly free. The battle for Harvest and Hearth had just begun, and I was ready to fight. The silence that followed their departure was a physical presence, a heavy blanket that settled over the house. I stood in the doorway for a long time, the cool night air doing little to quell the firestorm raging within me. The ultimatum my mother had delivered still echoed in the room, a declaration of war that I knew they would not hesitate to act upon. The first salvo came a few days later. I was at the market, arranging my display, when one of my most loyal suppliers, a gruff old farmer named George who grew the most incredible heirloom tomatoes, approached me with a troubled look on his face. "Alex," he said, his voice low and hesitant, "I had a visit from your sister and her husband yesterday." My heart sank. "Oh," I said, trying to sound casual. "What did they want?" George shifted uncomfortably. "They told me you were," struggling, "that Harvest and Hearth was going under, and that they were starting a new company to take over your contracts. They called it Golden Harvest." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The audacity, the sheer, unadulterated gall of it. They were not only trying to steal my business, but they were using my own name, my own brand, as a weapon against me. "That's a lie, George," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Harvest and Hearth is doing better than ever." He nodded, a look of relief on his face. "I figured as much, but they were very convincing. They're offering to pay more than you do, Alex, a lot more." And there it was. The serpent's venom, seeping into the foundations of the business I had built on trust and mutual respect. They were trying to poison my relationships, to turn my own people against me. The smear campaign escalated with a terrifying speed. Chloe, with her flair for the dramatic, took to social media, posting vague, pity-seeking statuses about family betrayal and the dark side of success. She didn't mention me by name, but the implication was clear. She was the victim and I was the villain. Ben, with his smarmy charm, worked the phones, calling my suppliers, my distributors, even some of my employees, spreading his toxic lies. He told them I was unethical, that I was stealing recipes from other artisans, that I was exploiting the very farmers I claimed to champion. The effect was insidious. Sales began to dip. A few of my smaller suppliers, tempted by the promise of more money, jumped ship to Golden Harvest. Even some of my own staff, people I had trained and mentored, began to look at me with suspicion, their once friendly smiles replaced by guarded expressions. The isolation was a crushing weight. I felt like I was drowning, the business I had poured my heart and soul into being dragged under by the undertow of my family's greed. I barely slept, my nights filled with a gnawing anxiety that ate away at my resolve. The final, devastating blow came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was going through my company's financials, trying to staunch the bleeding, when I noticed a series of large withdrawals from my parents' savings account. Withdrawals that coincided perfectly with the launch of Golden Harvest. I stared at the numbers on the screen, my blood turning to ice. They had always pleaded poverty, always claimed they had nothing to spare when I had been struggling to get Harvest and Hearth off the ground. But for Chloe, for their golden child, the coffers were wide open. The betrayal was a physical blow, a punch to the gut that left me breathless. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the years of lies, the lifetime of favoritism, the soul-crushing realization that in their eyes, I would never be enough. I closed my laptop, the click of the latch echoing in the silent house. The rain beat against the windows, a mournful rhythm that matched the storm raging in my heart. The grief was a raw, open wound, but beneath the pain, something else was beginning to stir. A cold, hard anger that was as sharp and clear as a shard of glass. They had underestimated me. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness, my passion for naivety. They had pushed me to the brink, and in doing so, they had unleashed a part of me I never knew existed. The time for defense was over. The time for mourning was over. The war for Harvest and Hearth had been declared, and I was about to show them what a woman with nothing left to lose was capable of. The serpent had shed its skin, and I was ready to strike back. The rain-streaked window panes reflected a distorted image of my face, a stranger with hollowed eyes and a jaw set like granite. The grief of the initial betrayal had been a wildfire, scorching everything in its path. But now, in its wake, the ground was fertile for a different kind of growth. A cold, calculated rage began to take root, its tendrils wrapping around my heart and squeezing out the last vestiges of sorrow. I had been wronged, deeply and fundamentally, and the desire for retribution was a thirst that could no longer be ignored. I couldn't fight their fire with my own brand of honor and integrity. They were playing a dirty game, and it was time I learned the rules. My first move was to shore up my defenses. I called a meeting with my remaining suppliers, the ones who had been with me from the beginning, the ones who valued loyalty over a quick buck. We met in my kitchen, the heart of my home and my business. I laid everything bare: the takeover attempt, the smear campaign, the financial sabotage. I showed them the proof, the social media posts, the emails, the bank statements. I didn't ask for their pity, I asked for their allegiance. "I know they're offering you more money," I said, my voice steady and clear. "And I can't match their offers, not yet. But what I can offer you is a partnership, a future. We built this business together, and I'll be damned if I let them tear it apart." To my immense relief, they stood by me. George, the tomato farmer, summed it up best. "We're not just your suppliers, Alex," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "We're your friends, and we don't turn our backs on our friends." With my supply chain secured, I went on the offensive. I started a quiet counterintelligence operation, using my network of loyal farmers to feed misinformation to Chloe and Ben. I let them believe I was on the verge of collapse, that their tactics were working. I wanted them to get cocky, to overplay their hand. And they did. Ben, blinded by his own arrogance, started bragging to anyone who would listen about a massive distribution deal he was about to land with Pinnacle Foods, a national supermarket chain notorious for its predatory business practices. They would acquire small, artisanal brands, gut them for their recipes and branding, and then mass-produce cheap, inferior versions for their stores. It was the kiss of death for any brand that valued quality and integrity. This was their endgame. They weren't just trying to steal my business, they were planning to sell its soul to the highest bidder. The thought of my grandmother's recipes, the ones I had painstakingly perfected, being churned out in a factory, stripped of their essence, filled me with a visceral rage. I knew then that I couldn't just win this war, I had to annihilate them. I had to leave them with nothing but the ashes of their own greed. I did my research on Pinnacle Foods, on their acquisitions executive, a man named Marcus Thorne. He was known for his ruthless efficiency, his love of a good deal, and his weakness for a compelling story. I requested a meeting, not as a competitor, but as a fellow artisan, someone who wanted to discuss the future of the artisanal market. I met him at their corporate headquarters, a sterile, soulless building that was the antithesis of everything I stood for. I wore a simple, elegant dress, a stark contrast to the power suits and slicked-back hair that populated the office. I was the underdog, the David to their Goliath, and I played the part to perfection. I told him the story of Harvest and Hearth, of my grandmother's legacy, of my passion for quality and community. I spoke of the challenges facing small producers in a market dominated by giants like Pinnacle. I didn't mention Chloe or Ben, not by name. I simply painted a picture of a cutthroat industry where authenticity was a liability and integrity was a commodity. Thorne listened, his face a mask of professional detachment, but I could see a flicker of interest in his eyes. I had piqued his curiosity, planted a seed of doubt in his mind. As I left the Pinnacle Foods headquarters, the city lights twinkling like a million tiny daggers, a plan began to form in my mind. It was a dangerous, high-stakes gamble, a tightrope walk over a canyon of financial ruin and personal devastation. But the thought of the look on my family's faces when it all came crashing down around them was a powerful motivator. I was no longer the victim. I was the architect of their downfall. The serpent had been provoked, and it was ready to strike. The kiss of death they had planned for me was about to be returned with interest. The plan was a poison pill, wrapped in a veneer of sweet, sweet surrender. It required precision, patience, and a level of ruthlessness I hadn't known I possessed. The first step was to create the bait. I locked myself in my kitchen, the heart of my creative world, and for 2 weeks I did nothing but cook. I developed a new line of products for Harvest and Hearth, a collection so exquisite, so complex, that it would be impossible to mass-produce. I used hyper-local, seasonal ingredients, the kind that couldn't be sourced from a corporate supplier. Wild elderflower from the riverbank, figs from a single ancient tree in George's orchard, honey from a reclusive beekeeper who only sold to me. The recipes were intricate, multi-layered, and tied to the very soul of the land. This was my masterpiece, the embodiment of everything Harvest and Hearth stood for. Then I created a second set of recipes. These were the ones I would leak to Chloe and Ben. They were simplified, cheaper versions of my new line, cleverly designed to mimic the flavor profiles but lacking the depth, the complexity, the soul. They were good, but they were a shadow of the real thing. I passed them to George, who, with a conspiratorial wink, passed them to one of the farmers who had defected to Golden Harvest, knowing they would find their way into Ben's eager hands. Next, I began a subtle rebranding of Harvest and Hearth. I emphasized our commitment to community-supported agriculture and the slow food movement. I created a new logo, a beautiful, hand-drawn image of a tree with its roots deeply embedded in the earth. I wanted to create a brand identity so authentic, so deeply rooted in its values, that a corporate giant like Pinnacle couldn't hope to replicate it. With the pieces in place, it was time to set the trap. I called my mother, my voice a carefully crafted blend of contrition and exhaustion. I told her I was tired of fighting, that they had won. I told her I was willing to be acquired by Golden Harvest, but on one condition: they had to secure the Pinnacle Foods deal first. "I need to know that you're serious about this," I said, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. "I need to know that you have the business acumen to take Harvest and Hearth to the next level. This is my legacy, after all. I can't just hand it over to amateurs." The bait was taken. My family, blinded by their arrogance and their greed, saw my surrender as their ultimate victory. They were so sure of their own brilliance, so convinced of my weakness, that they never once questioned my motives. The date was set for the Pinnacle Foods tasting and acquisition meeting. The night before, I stood in my kitchen, the real and the fake product lines laid out before me. The real jars gleamed with an inner light, their contents a testament to the passion and integrity that had fueled my every move. The fake jars, by contrast, seemed dull, lifeless, their contents a pale imitation of the real thing. A wave of doubt washed over me. What if my plan failed? What if Thorne saw through my deception? What if I lost everything? I picked up a jar of the real elderflower and fig jam. It sent a fragrant reminder of the summer meadows and sun-drenched orchards of my home. This was more than just a business. It was a part of me, and I would do whatever it took to protect it. The next morning, I dressed with the care of a warrior preparing for battle. I chose a simple, elegant dress of deep green, the color of the earth, of new beginnings. I tied my hair back in a severe knot, my face a mask of calm determination. I was the eye of my own hurricane, a still point in the center of a storm of my own making. The table was set, the pieces were in place, and the serpent was ready to strike. The Last Supper was about to be served, and I had a feeling my family was about to lose their appetite. The Pinnacle Foods boardroom was a monument to corporate sterility. A long, polished mahogany table reflected the cold, fluorescent lights, and the air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and ambition. Chloe and Ben were already there, seated at the head of the table like a king and queen holding court. They were beaming, their faces flushed with a triumphant arrogance that made my stomach turn. I was seated at the far end of the table, a silent observer, my presence a mere formality, a condition of my surrender. Marcus Thorne, the acquisitions executive, sat at the opposite end, his face an unreadable mask of professional detachment. The presentation began. Ben, in his element, launched into a slick, well-rehearsed speech about synergy, scalability, and market disruption. He spoke of Golden Harvest as if it were a titan of industry, a revolutionary force that was about to change the face of the artisanal food market. Chloe, with her practiced charm, presented the products. She spoke of their unique flavor profiles, their innovative ingredient combinations, their unparalleled quality. She was a natural, a born saleswoman, and I had to admit she was good. The Pinnacle executives tasted the products, their faces betraying nothing of their thoughts. They nodded, they murmured, they made notes on their iPads. The tension in the room was a palpable thing, a living, breathing entity that seemed to suck the very air from my lungs. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Thorne spoke. "Impressive," he said, his voice a low rumble that sent a shiver down my spine. "Very impressive. We're prepared to make you an offer." A wave of relief washed over Chloe and Ben's faces. They exchanged a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. They had done it. They had won. And then the serpent struck. "But before we do," Thorne continued, his eyes flicking to me, "I'd like to hear from Ms. Thompson. As the founder of the brand you're hoping to acquire, her valuation of the company would be insightful." All eyes turned to me. I rose from my chair, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I walked to the head of the table, my heels clicking a steady, deliberate beat on the polished floor. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne," I said, my voice calm and clear. "But I'm not here to provide a valuation. I'm here to provide a comparison." I placed a single, unlabeled jar on the table. It was my elderflower and fig jam, the real one, the one that held the soul of my company in its sweet, fragrant depths. "This," I said, "is the future of Harvest and Hearth." I opened the jar, the scent of summer filling the sterile boardroom. I passed it to Thorne, who, with a look of intrigued curiosity, took a small spoonful. His eyes widened. A slow smile spread across his face. "Now asterisk this," he said, his voice filled with a genuine admiration that was more valuable than any contract, "is a game changer." The room was silent, the only sound the gentle clinking of the spoon against the jar. And then I revealed my hand. "Golden Harvest," I announced, my voice ringing with a newfound authority, "is a sham." I laid out the evidence, piece by damning piece. The social media posts, the emails, the bank statements. I exposed their smear campaign, their lies, their deceit. I showed them the two sets of recipes, the real and the fake, and explained how they had been duped into believing they were acquiring a brand that was nothing more than a pale imitation of the real thing. I revealed that my most crucial suppliers had signed exclusive, ironclad contracts with me, making it impossible for Golden Harvest to produce their flagship items. And then, for the grand finale, I delivered the coup de grace. "I have no intention of selling Harvest and Hearth to Pinnacle Foods," I declared, my gaze locking with Thorne's. "In fact, I've just finalized a partnership with the National Food Co-op Consortium, a group that shares my commitment to quality, integrity, and community. We're going to expand, but on our own terms without sacrificing the soul of the company." The silence in the room was deafening. Chloe's face was a mask of horror, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. Ben was ashen, his smug confidence replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated panic. Thorne, to his credit, took it all in stride. He leaned back in his chair, a slow, appreciative smile spreading across his face. "Well played, Miss Thompson," he said, his voice filled with a grudging respect. "Well played, indeed." The Last Supper was over. The trap had been sprung. And as I watched the ruins of my family's ambitions smolder in the cold, sterile light of the Pinnacle Foods boardroom, I felt not a flicker of remorse. Only the sweet, satisfying taste of victory. The aftermath was a symphony of destruction, a beautiful, chaotic crescendo to my carefully orchestrated masterpiece. Pinnacle Foods, furious at the attempted deception, not only backed out of the deal, but threatened Chloe and Ben with a lawsuit for fraud and misrepresentation. The news spread like wildfire through the small, insular world of the artisanal food community. Golden Harvest, the company built on a foundation of lies and deceit, collapsed overnight. My family was shattered. The money my parents had so freely given to Chloe and Ben was gone, swallowed up by their failed venture and the legal fees that were now piling up. Their reputation was in tatters, their names synonymous with greed and incompetence. My parents, their eyes finally opened to the truth, tried to apologize. They came to my house, their faces etched with a sorrow that was as pathetic as it was predictable. "We're so sorry, Alex," my mother whispered, her voice choked with tears. "We never should have doubted you." I looked at them, at the two people who had caused me so much pain, and I felt nothing. The years of yearning for their approval, the lifetime of feeling second best, had been burned away in the crucible of their betrayal. "It's too late for apologies," I said, my voice cold and distant. "You made your choice, and now you have to live with it." I closed the door on their tear-streaked faces, the sound of the latch clicking into place a final, definitive end to a chapter of my life that had been filled with nothing but pain and disappointment. The inheritance they had always held over my head, the one they had used as a weapon to control and manipulate me, was meaningless now. I had my own legacy, my own fortune, my own family, the one I had built with my own two hands. Months later, Harvest and Hearth was more successful than ever. Our partnership with the Co-op Consortium had allowed us to expand our reach without sacrificing our integrity. We were celebrated for our authenticity, our commitment to quality, our connection to the community. I was at a bustling farmer's market, the sun warm on my face, the air filled with the familiar, comforting sense of my childhood, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Alex, it's Chloe. I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but we're losing everything. We're desperate. Please, can you help us?" I read the message, a ghost of the old pity, the old sense of familial obligation, stirring in my heart. And then I did something I had never done before. I deleted the message without replying. A sense of peace, of profound and utter liberation, washed over me. The golden cage was broken, its bars melted down in the fire of my own making. The serpent's share, the portion of my life they had tried to steal, was nothing. And in losing it, I had gained everything. I looked out at the sea of faces, at the people who had stood by me, at the community I had built, and I smiled. I was free. I was whole. And I was finally home.